The autumn afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Street, one of the quieter residential areas on the outskirts of the city where families with modest incomes had built their lives in small but well-maintained homes. The leaves had begun their annual transformation into brilliant shades of gold and crimson, creating a carpet of natural beauty that contrasted sharply with the worn sidewalks and aging infrastructure that spoke of a community that had seen better economic times. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew their neighbors' names, where children still played outside until the streetlights came on, and where acts of kindness were as common as the morning sunrise. Among the residents of this tight-knit community was Marcus Thompson, a 13-year-old boy whose circumstances had forced him to grow up faster than most children his age, yet who had somehow managed to retain a heart full of compassion and an unwavering belief in the goodness of people despite the hardships he had endured. Marcus lived with his grandmother, Eleanor Thompson, in a small two-bedroom house that had been in their family for 3 generations. His parents had died in a car accident when he was just 8 years old, leaving him in the care of his 67-year-old grandmother who survived on a meager Social Security check and whatever odd jobs she could find despite her arthritis and declining health. The boy had learned early in life that luxury was not something their family could afford, but he had also learned that the most valuable things in life could not be purchased with money anyway. His grandmother had taught him to find joy in simple pleasures, to appreciate the beauty in everyday moments, and most importantly, to never walk past someone or something in need without offering whatever help he could provide, no matter how small that help might seem to others. On this particular afternoon, Marcus was walking home from school, his worn backpack slung over his shoulder and his mind occupied with thoughts of the homework assignment he needed to complete before dinner. He had taken the same route home every day for the past 5 years, walking past the same houses, the same mailboxes, the same fire hydrant where the neighborhood dogs liked to stop during their daily walks. The routine had become so familiar that he could probably navigate it with his eyes closed, which made what he was about to discover all the more shocking and unexpected. As he rounded the corner onto his street, something immediately caught his attention that made him stop dead in his tracks, his heart beginning to race with a mixture of concern and confusion. There, lying motionless on the sidewalk about 50 yards ahead of him, was a medium-sized dog with golden-brown fur that appeared to be some kind of mixed breed, possibly part German Shepherd and part Golden Retriever. The animal was lying on its side, completely still, and at first glance, Marcus feared the worst. His first instinct was to run toward the dog to see if it was still alive, but as he got closer, he noticed something unusual that made him slow his approach and look more carefully at the scene before him. Clutched tightly in the dog's mouth was what appeared to be a folded piece of white paper, held so securely that even in its unconscious or possibly deceased state, the animal had not released its grip on whatever message it had been carrying. Marcus knelt down beside the collapsed animal, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out to check for signs of life. To his immense relief, he could feel the dog's chest rising and falling in shallow but steady breaths, and when he gently placed his hand on the animal's side, he could feel a weak but persistent heartbeat. The dog was alive, but clearly in distress, possibly from exhaustion, dehydration, or illness. As Marcus examined the animal more closely, he noticed that its fur was matted and dirty, suggesting it had been wandering for some time, and its ribs were visible through its coat, indicating that it had not eaten properly in days, possibly weeks. But what captured Marcus's attention most intensely was the piece of paper that the dog refused to release, even in its weakened state, as if whatever was written on that paper was more important than its own survival. Marcus's heart filled with compassion as he realized that this poor animal had been through an ordeal that had pushed it to the very limits of its endurance. He gently stroked the dog's head, speaking in soft, soothing tones that his grandmother had taught him to use when dealing with frightened or injured animals. "It's okay, boy," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if the dog was male or female. "You're safe now. I'm going to help you." As he continued to comfort the animal, Marcus noticed that its grip on the piece of paper was beginning to relax slightly, though it still held on with a determination that suggested this was no ordinary piece of trash or random debris that the dog had picked up during its journey. The more Marcus observed the situation, the more convinced he became that there was something significant about this piece of paper, something that had driven this poor animal to carry it despite its obvious suffering and exhaustion. The dog's paws were worn and bleeding, indicating it had traveled a considerable distance, and its tongue was dry and cracked from dehydration, yet it had never released its grip on whatever message it was carrying. Marcus had heard stories of dogs traveling incredible distances to find their way home or to deliver important messages, stories that had always seemed almost too incredible to believe. But seeing this animal's condition and its unwavering determination to protect the paper in its mouth, he began to understand that he might be witnessing exactly that kind of extraordinary loyalty and dedication. After several minutes of gentle coaxing and careful maneuvering, Marcus was finally able to ease the piece of paper from the dog's mouth without causing additional distress to the already suffering animal. The paper was damp from the dog's saliva and slightly torn at the edges from being carried for what must have been many miles, but the writing on it was still clearly visible. As Marcus unfolded the paper with trembling hands, he could see that it contained a handwritten message in blue ink, written in the shaky handwriting of someone who was either very young, very old, or writing under conditions of extreme emotional distress. The paper appeared to have been torn from a notebook, and there were water stains on it that could have been from rain, but looked more like they might have been from tears. As Marcus began to read the message, his own eyes began to fill with tears as he realized the profound tragedy and heartbreaking love story that was unfolding before him on this simple piece of notebook paper. The message was addressed to whoever finds my dog Lucky, and it continued with words that would change Marcus's understanding of loyalty, love, and the lengths to which both humans and animals will go to protect and care for each other. The handwriting was that of a child, probably not much younger than Marcus himself, and as he read the words, he could feel the desperation and love that had motivated someone to entrust their most precious companion with a message that represented their only hope of connection with the outside world. The message revealed a story of a family in crisis, of a child who had been forced to make an impossible choice, and of a dog whose unwavering loyalty had driven it to attempt a journey that would have challenged even the strongest and healthiest animal. As Marcus read each word, he understood that he was not just looking at a piece of paper, but at a lifeline thrown by someone who had no other options, someone who had placed all their hope and trust in the intelligence and determination of their four-legged best friend. The weight of responsibility that came with this discovery was overwhelming, and Marcus realized that what happened next would determine not just the fate of this exhausted dog lying before him, but possibly the life of a child who was counting on Lucky to complete a mission that had already cost the brave animal almost everything it had to give. With his hands shaking from both emotion and the magnitude of what he was reading, Marcus carefully smoothed out the wrinkled paper and began to read the full message aloud, his voice barely above a whisper as the words cut through him like a knife. To whoever finds my dog Lucky, the message began, my name is Sarah and I am 10 years old. If you are reading this, it means Lucky made it farther than I thought he could, and I hope that means there is still hope for both of us. My daddy got very sick 3 months ago and had to go to the hospital, and then my mommy got sick too, and now they are both in heaven watching over me. I have been living with my mean uncle who doesn't like me or Lucky, and yesterday he said he was going to take Lucky to the pound because he costs too much money to feed and he makes too much noise when he misses me. As Marcus continued reading, tears began streaming down his face, and his voice broke with emotion as he realized the desperate situation that had led to this incredible journey. I know Lucky is the smartest and bravest dog in the whole world, so I wrote this letter and put it in his mouth and told him to find someone who would help us. My uncle locked me in my room and said I can't come out until I stop crying about Lucky, but I'm not going to stop crying because Lucky is all I have left of my family, and I love him more than anything in the whole world. If you find this letter, please don't let them take Lucky to the pound where they might hurt him. I know I don't have any money to give you, but I promise I will be the best kid ever if you can help us stay together. Lucky knows the way back to our house because we used to walk to the park every day before everything got so sad. The message continued with specific details about where Sarah lived, including her address and her uncle's name, along with a heartbreaking plea that revealed the depth of a child's desperation and the pure love between a girl and her dog. Lucky has been my best friend since I was 7 years old, and he sleeps in my bed every night and helps me not be scared when I have bad dreams about mommy and daddy. I taught him how to carry things in his mouth, and I practiced with him every day for a week before I gave him this letter, so I know he won't let go of it no matter what happens. Please, please, please help us. I don't want to live without Lucky, and I think Lucky would be too sad to live without me too. We belong together, and I know my mommy and daddy would want us to take care of each other. Marcus had to stop reading several times as his emotions overwhelmed him, and he found himself looking down at Lucky with a new understanding of the incredible love and determination that had driven this animal to travel what must have been many miles in his weakened condition. The dog's eyes fluttered open briefly, and Marcus could see in them the same desperate hope that he had heard in Sarah's written words. Lucky had risked everything to complete this mission, had pushed his body beyond its limits because he understood that the life he shared with Sarah was worth any sacrifice, and that their bond was stronger than the physical pain and exhaustion that had finally brought him to collapse just when he had found someone who might be able to help. The final paragraph of the letter was perhaps the most heartbreaking of all, written in handwriting that became increasingly shaky and was obviously stained with tears. "I don't know if anyone will ever find this letter, but I had to try because Lucky and I promised each other we would never give up. If something happens to me, please make sure Lucky knows I love him and that I'm sorry I couldn't take better care of him. And if something happens to Lucky, please tell him thank you for being the best dog and the best friend anyone could ever have. We just want to be together, and we want someone to love us the way families are supposed to love each other. Maybe if you help us, we can be your family too, because I know how to cook a little bit and Lucky is very good at making people happy when they are sad. Please don't throw this letter away. Please help us." The message was signed simply, Sarah and Lucky, forever and always, with a small drawing of a girl hugging a dog, both of them smiling despite the tears that had obviously fallen on the paper as it was being written. Marcus sat there on the sidewalk, holding the letter in his trembling hands while tears continued to stream down his face, feeling the enormous weight of responsibility that had suddenly been placed on his young shoulders. He looked down at Lucky, who was still breathing but growing weaker by the minute, and he knew that every second that passed was crucial not only for the dog's survival but for Sarah's future as well. The address on the letter indicated that Lucky had traveled nearly 15 miles through city streets, suburbs, and busy highways to reach this point, a journey that would have been challenging for a healthy adult dog, let alone one that was already weakened by hunger and emotional distress. The fact that Lucky had made it this far was nothing short of miraculous, but Marcus could see that the brave animal was at the very limit of his endurance and needed immediate help if he was going to survive. Without hesitation, Marcus gently lifted Lucky into his arms, surprised by how light the dog felt due to his malnourished condition, and began the 2-block walk to his grandmother's house, all the while speaking softly to the unconscious animal and promising him that everything was going to be all right. As he walked, Marcus's mind raced with plans and possibilities, knowing that he would need his grandmother's help not only to care for Lucky but also to figure out how to rescue Sarah from what sounded like an impossible situation. Eleanor Thompson had always taught her grandson that when life presents you with someone in need, you don't hesitate, you don't make excuses, and you don't worry about the cost or the inconvenience, you simply do whatever needs to be done because that's what good people do for each other. When Marcus burst through the front door of their small house, carrying Lucky in his arms and calling for his grandmother, Eleanor immediately recognized the urgency in her grandson's voice and came rushing from the kitchen, her arthritis forgotten in the face of this obvious emergency. "Grandma, we have to help him," Marcus said, his words tumbling over each other as he tried to explain the situation while gently laying Lucky on the old quilt that his grandmother quickly spread on the living room floor. As Eleanor examined the exhausted dog, her experienced hands checking his vitals and assessing his condition, Marcus read Sarah's letter aloud, his voice breaking again as he reached the most emotional parts of the child's desperate plea for help. Eleanor Thompson had lived through enough hardship in her 70-plus years to recognize genuine desperation when she heard it, and as she listened to her grandson read Sarah's letter, her own eyes filled with tears at the thought of a 10-year-old child facing such overwhelming loss and fear. She had raised Marcus after losing his parents, so she understood the unique pain that comes with being a child who has lost everything and everyone that represented safety and love in their world. Without saying a word, she went to the kitchen and returned with a bowl of warm water, some clean towels, and a can of the chicken broth she kept for when Marcus was sick, immediately beginning the process of caring for Lucky while her mind worked through the logistics of what would need to happen next. As Eleanor gently cleaned Lucky's wounds and coaxed small amounts of broth into his mouth, she explained to Marcus that they would need to act quickly and decisively if they were going to help both Lucky and Sarah. "This dog has been through more than most animals could survive," she said, her voice filled with admiration for Lucky's determination and courage. "But he's strong, and more importantly, he's loved, and that kind of love gives creatures a reason to fight even when everything seems hopeless." She told Marcus that they would need to contact the authorities about Sarah's situation, but they would also need to be prepared to provide a safe haven for both the child and her dog if the legal system moved too slowly, or if Sarah's uncle tried to separate them before proper arrangements could be made. Eleanor had spent her entire life helping others despite her own limited resources, and she wasn't about to let a child and her loyal dog suffer when she had the power to help them, even if it meant stretching their already tight budget and opening their small home to 2 more family members who desperately needed a place where they would be loved and protected. What followed was a whirlwind of phone calls, visits from social workers, and tense negotiations with Sarah's uncle, who initially resisted giving up custody of his niece until he realized that he would no longer be responsible for her care or eligible for the small monthly survivor benefits that had been his primary motivation for taking her in after her parents' death. Eleanor Thompson, despite her modest circumstances, had somehow managed to convince the authorities that her home could provide a stable and loving environment for Sarah, and that the bond between the child and her dog was so strong that separating them would cause more psychological damage than any financial hardship they might face together. The legal process moved with unusual speed, partly because Sarah's situation was so obviously desperate and partly because Eleanor's reputation in the community as a woman of integrity and compassion had preceded her in every office and courtroom they entered. The reunion between Sarah and Lucky took place 3 days after Marcus had found the collapsed dog on the sidewalk, and it was a moment that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. Lucky had recovered remarkably quickly once he was properly fed and hydrated, as if the knowledge that his mission had been successful had given him the strength to overcome his physical exhaustion and injuries. When Sarah walked through the front door of Eleanor's house, still clutching the small suitcase that contained everything she owned in the world, Lucky's tail began wagging with such enthusiasm that his entire body shook with joy, and the sound that came from his throat was part bark, part whine, and entirely pure happiness. Sarah dropped to her knees and buried her face in Lucky's fur, and both the child and the dog began to cry, their tears mixing together as they held each other with the desperate relief of 2 souls who had thought they might never see each other again. Marcus watched this reunion with tears streaming down his own face, understanding for the first time in his young life the true meaning of unconditional love and the incredible power that exists in the bond between 2 beings who have chosen to face the world together no matter what challenges life might bring. He realized that by finding Lucky and reading Sarah's letter, he had not only saved 2 lives but had also learned something profound about courage, loyalty, and the way that love can motivate ordinary creatures to accomplish extraordinary things when they are fighting for someone they care about more than themselves. The small house on Maple Street, which had always been filled with love despite its modest circumstances, suddenly felt even more complete with the addition of Sarah and Lucky, as if they had been missing pieces of a puzzle that was now finally whole. In the months that followed, Sarah flourished under Eleanor's patient guidance and Marcus's friendship, gradually healing from the trauma of losing her parents and the fear she had experienced while living with her uncle. She proved to be exactly as helpful and grateful as she had promised in her letter, taking on small household chores and responsibilities that she performed with the enthusiasm of someone who had finally found a place where she truly belonged. Lucky became not just Sarah's companion but a beloved member of the entire family, his presence bringing joy and laughter to their daily routines and serving as a constant reminder of the miracle that had brought them all together. The dog that had once collapsed from exhaustion on a sidewalk, clutching a desperate message in his mouth, was now healthy and happy, his coat gleaming and his eyes bright with the contentment that comes from knowing he had successfully completed the most important mission of his life. The story of Lucky's incredible journey and Sarah's rescue spread throughout their community and beyond, inspiring countless people with its message of hope, loyalty, and the power of love to overcome even the most impossible obstacles. Marcus often reflected on how a simple walk home from school had changed not only his own life but the lives of everyone around him, teaching him that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be present and ready to help when someone needs you most. Eleanor would often say that Lucky hadn't just carried a piece of paper that day, he had carried proof that miracles still happen in the world, and that love really can find a way to triumph over any hardship when good people choose to open their hearts and their homes to those who need them most. If this incredible story of loyalty, love, and the power of never giving up touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales that remind us of the extraordinary things that happen when compassion meets courage. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join our community of people who believe in the magic of second chances and the miracle of found families. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope, and that sometimes help comes in the most unexpected ways. Thank you for watching, and remember, Every act of kindness creates ripples that can change the world, one rescued heart at a time.